This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pio Ontiveros. Tonight on the program, hundreds of thousands of public utility drivers struggling with 10 straight weeks of fuel price hikes are set to finally get financial help from the government. But a transport coalition says this may not be enough to prevent a planned nationwide strike next week. Delta and Omicron variants combined, World Health experts are looking into a hybrid version of these coronavirus variants detected in some European countries. And armies have the permission to dance today as K-pop sensation BTS hits the concert stage in its home base for the first time in over 2 years. As pump prices continue to skyrocket, the government is releasing tomorrow the first installment of the fuel subsidy for public utility drivers. Amor Santos tells us some transport groups are now putting their fare hike petition in the backseat.
4 transport groups fought for a 5 peso increase in the minimum fare of jeepneys in Metro Manila, Central Luzon, and Southern Tagalog. Pending any decision, they called on regulators to revert the fare to 10 pesos. But after a meeting with Transportation Secretary Arthur Tugade on Wednesday, Pasang Mazda is setting aside the petition for now. Transport leader Kaobet Martin says Tugade promised to double the fuel subsidy for drivers and include traditional jeepneys in the government's service contracting program for a more stable income.
Sobra-sobra po yan. Hindi na aragabyado ang transport sector dyan. Tatagal lang ang mga 4 na buwan ng service contracting. Hopefully, by the time tapos na po ang gera sa Ukraine at Russia at normalize na operation.
Acting Budget Secretary Tina Canda confirms the Economic Development Cluster has agreed to double the allocation for fuel subsidy to 5 billion pesos. The first half will be released by Friday, the other 2.5 billion pesos in April. Transportation Undersecretary Steve Pastor says qualified drivers will each receive 6,500 pesos for the first tranche, but no definite amount yet for the second round of aid. He says the department is waiting for data on the number of tricycle drivers and full-time drivers of ride-hailing apps and delivery services.
Ang tricycles po sa LGU yan, at yung mga ride-hailing apps po sa DTI po yan. Okay, so we are awaiting the list. Once we receive the funding po, we can distribute a day or two sa ating mga GST na itong pasada card.
But not all transport groups are satisfied with the government's pronouncements. Liga ng Transportasyon at Operators sa Pilipinas or LTOP is not taking a detour from its proposed 6 peso fare hike.
Ang tanong ko, yung bang pangako ay pwedeng dalhin sa palengke para makabili ng bigas at makabili ng ulam? Diba? May pamalingki ba nila yung pangako?
Ayaw naming gawin ito, ma'am. Pero pag tumaas pa, ma'am, wala rin kaming gagawin sa biyahe, wala nang kita.
The National Public Transport Coalition warns drivers nationwide may be forced to take a more drastic action, staging a transport strike if fuel prices will again soar on March 15th, unless the government suspends excise taxes. Amor Santos, CNN Philippines.
Hundreds of thousands of PUV drivers are set to benefit from the fuel subsidy, but there are millions of tricycle drivers nationwide, and they're hoping they will not be left out in the distribution of cash aid, as they are equally having difficulty because of expensive fuel. Here's George Cahilas with the story.
Tricycle drivers here in Barangay Santo Niño, Parañaque City, like Gacela Ruben, are feeling the pinch. They can barely cope with fuel becoming expensive in a matter of weeks. Ruben says his take-home has been cut by more than half, from 500 pesos before the pandemic, and that the smaller amount comes from working for 12 hours.
Hindi yun nagsasapat ng kita ho namin sa biyahe ho namin. Ang pasahero pa ho namin, pa utay-utay pa ho rito. Hindi pa ho sapat.
In Eastern Visayas, tricycle drivers have asked for a substantial fare increase. From 9 pesos, they want a minimum fare for at least 15 pesos. As a stopgap measure, the government will release a one-time 5 billion peso fuel subsidy for public utility vehicle drivers. This amount would mean each of the over 377,000 drivers will receive 13,000 pesos. The 2022 budget law specifically identified tricycle drivers as among recipients of the fuel subsidy. House Ways and Means Committee Chairperson Joey Salceda says tricycle drivers number more than 4 million nationwide. In Parañaque City alone, Mayor Edwin Olivares says the local government counts around 14,000 tricycle units.
Kailangan isama naman yung sektor ng tatlong gulong. Kasi affected na sila eh. Hindi lang itong ating pagtaas ng gasolina, pati pa nung pandemic. Ngayon lang ako nakaka-recover ng konti dahil nga alert level 1 ng Metro Manila. Tapos ito na naman yung ating increase ng ating gasoline natin.
So how will government fund the subsidy for tricycle drivers? Salceda says the president should declare a state of economic crisis to dip into the calamity fund for such purpose. Even presidential candidate Senator Ping Lacson is calling on the president to convene a special session of Congress to pass measures that will help people cope with costly fuel.
Pwede pa rin nila increase. Pero dapat talaga i-cover lahat kasi lahat yan may bituke. Lahat may pamilya. Bakit tayo mag-limit lamang doon sa ipopera natin yung TODA? Gutom din yun.
Tricycle drivers like Ruben hope help will come soon as the crisis unfolds and the future remains uncertain. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
Some oil companies are offering a reprieve from the weekly price hikes. Petrogas is slashing fuel prices until Sunday. It's cutting the cost of gasoline by 5 pesos and 85 centavos per liter and diesel by 3 pesos and 60 centavos per liter. Petrogas says this is to minimize the impact of price hikes on motorists. And this one's only valid until today. Petron is giving its value card and super driver card holders a chance to earn points that would translate to a 2 peso per liter discount on all fuel products. Well, after a series of fuel price hikes, expect electricity charges to follow this month. Energy distributor Meralco will impose a 6 centavo per kilowatt-hour increase, which is equivalent to a 13 pesos add-on for those consuming 200 kilowatt-hours per month. Meralco explains suppliers are charging more for power generation. This is the first power rate hike after 2 consecutive reductions this year. Meralco warns of more power rate movements in the coming months. The world market expects oil prices to remain expensive as tension between Ukraine and Russia escalate.
Dinifer na 500 million in terms of the generation cost, that's 18 centavos. So yan ay i-recover over 3 months starting April. Plus yung additional distribution through up na refund na in-implement namin based sa order ng ERC. So yung mga factors na yan nakatulong para to keep rates somehow manageable, no?
So that this will be reflected in the May generation charge. So if there is any effect of the increase in world crude oil prices, we will feel it in the Malampaya prices starting May generation charge.
A nuclear plant in Ukraine has been disconnected from the power grid following the takeover by Russian forces. Authorities say the Chernobyl nuclear power plant lost its electricity supply on Wednesday. A dangerous leak could happen if the generators are not sustained within 48 hours. About 210 people working in Chernobyl could be affected. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has called for a ceasefire to restore power supply at the plant. In 1986, a reactor explosion at the nuclear power plant killed 31 people. 3 people were killed after Russian troops attacked a maternity hospital in the city of Mariupol in Ukraine in what was supposed to be a ceasefire. Authorities say more than a dozen others were injured. The bombing happened despite a 12-hour ceasefire proposed by Moscow to help civilians flee to safety. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of genocide as he appealed to NATO to drive Russian forces from his nation's skies. Meanwhile, more humanitarian corridors will be opened in several parts of Ukraine, but it is still unclear if this has been agreed upon with Russia. Almost 35,000 Ukrainians were rescued through evacuation corridors. Up ahead, the World Health Organization confirms a hybrid version of the Delta and Omicron variants, and COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia is taking his hands off the cases involving Bongbong Marcos and 3 other presidential candidates. Details next.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
Welcome back. While COVID-19 cases are dropping, the World Health Organization says it is now studying a hybrid version of the Delta and Omicron variants. The recombinant has been detected in France, Denmark, and the Netherlands. The WHO says the Delta-Omicron combination is not surprising given the intense circulation and mutations of both variants. It adds it has not seen any change in its severity so far.
We do expect to see recombinants because this is what viruses do. They change over time. We're seeing a very intense level of circulation. We are seeing this virus infect animals with the possibility of infecting humans again. So again, the pandemic is far from over.
Today marks the start of the fourth round of the national vaccination drive. COVID-19 shots are available in doctors' clinics and workplace health facilities in the next 3 days. House-to-house vaccinations also underway. Health officials say vaccinators will also bring the doses to other areas such as churches, jails, and air and seaports.
We will do everything to continue access improvement, no, for our people. Para nang sa ganun, makamit natin yung 80% of our target population to be vaccinated fully, which is equivalent to 90 million Filipinos. Okay? So, while we haven't reached that, the possibility of another surge will always be there.
The government aims to vaccinate about 1.8 million people until Sunday. Newly appointed COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia is stepping back from cases involving his former clients, Bongbong Marcos and 3 other presidential candidates. That's amid concerns of a possible conflict of interest. Melissa Lopez reports.
Veteran election lawyer George Garcia starts his term as poll commissioner with gestures meant to build public confidence in the COMELEC just 2 months before voting day. His first act is to take his hands off petitions that involve past clients, including 4 presidential bets.
I wrote a letter po address sa ating clerk of court na sinasabi ko itong mga kasong ito, i-enumerate ko ang lahat ng mga cases na hindi ako magpaparticipate at ko ng kaso ni former Senator Bongbong Marcos. I will likewise write a letter to the clerk of court stating that I will not participate in any way dito sa mga cases.
Garcia represented former Senator Bongbong Marcos in his 2016 electoral protest He also previously worked with Senators Manny Pacquiao and Ping Lacson, and most recently with Manila Mayor Isko Moreno. Like new Chairman Saidamen Pangarungan and Commissioner Amy Neri, Garcia presents himself as an independent and fair poll executive.
But definitely, I'll do everything na trabaho, mapapakahirap. Kasi nga, isipin nyo na lang, pag itong election na ito hindi rin successful, do you think may pag-asa pa kami ma-confirm?
Garcia attended his first unbanked meeting on Wednesday, bringing two major reforms on the table. First, he wants to revisit COMELEC's new rule on requiring campaign permits for in-person gatherings, saying there's room to relax measures, especially with declining COVID-19 cases. Second, he is asking to review the controversial Operation Baklas in light of the Supreme Court's TRO.
Hanggat hindi po nagka-clarify o decision ng Korte Suprema, in the meantime po, then we will have to abide definitely with the Supreme Court restraining order. Personally po, sabi ko, private property should be outside the regulation of the Commission on Election.
Garcia also says he can assist a group of teachers who are calling for tax-free benefits and honoraria on their pay as poll workers come May.
1,000 pesos ang itinaas, pero yung ibabawas naman sa tax namin ay 1,400. Nasaan ang lohika nun?
The 7-member unbank has only 8 weeks left to deliver these reforms, along with final preparations for the May 9 polls. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
An update on the presidential candidates 60 days before the Filipino votes. Senator Ping Lacson is among those being considered for endorsement by the ruling party PDP Laban. That revelation coming from Parañaque Mayor Edwin Olivares, the Cusi faction's vice president for NCR. The faction had endorsed the vice presidential bid of Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte.
In terms of qualification, wala po tayong masasabi kay Senator Ping. Mula nung nasa PNP siya, ilang term ng bilang senator natin. Ang problem lang po namin, I belong to the party ng PDP. So, i-convene namin po before the 25 ulit yung National Executive Committee through consultation po namin sa aming mga chapter PDP natin. Tapos magkakaroon po ng official statement. At andun po si Senator Ping, isa po sa tinitingnan po for endorsement for President ng PDP.
The camp of Vice President Leni Robredo hits back at what it says is red tagging of her campaign rallies. Robredo's spokesperson Barry Gutierrez says red tagging masked as concern is, quote, a new low. The statement comes as Lacson insists Robredo's campaign rally in Cavite was infiltrated by communists based on the information he got from a supposed rebel surrenderee. Lacson says his team is also verifying whether communists were also present in Robredo's sorties in Iloilo and Bulacan. Labor leader Leody de Guzman renewing his calls to scrap the oil deregulation law to ease the burden of the transportation sector and ordinary workers amid the oil price hike.
Pangalagaan ng gobyerno, proteksyonan ng gobyerno, hindi yung mga korporasyon ng langis, kundi yung mamamayan. At ang isang paraan, makialam siya, huwag nga ipaubaya sa negosyo ng mga korporasyon ng langis yung pagtatakda ng presyo.
Senator Manny Pacquiao warns scammers who use his name for money-making schemes could face jail time. He's looking into offering a cash reward for information that could lead to their arrests. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno in favor of postponing the barangay elections this December, saying the money is better used to provide aid to people amid the oil price hike. Meanwhile, his running mate Willie Ong proposing an interagency task force to handle the effects of a possible nuclear war amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Gino-volunteer ko na sarili ko. Ako na lang mag-head. Diba? Kalimutan na natin itong eleksyon. Ako muna head, hindi na tayo makahintay ng July eh. Bibili na natin yung potassium iodide. Diba? I-ready na natin yung mga tao. Tuturuan na natin kung anong gagawin.
The tandem of Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte says church leaders are embracing the UNITEAM's call for unity. The statement comes after Marcos and Duterte met with Bishop Leopoldo Haushan of the Diocese of Bangued in Abra and Bishop Ted Malangen of the Jesus Christ the Deliverer Church in Bulacan. The Marcos camp this week urged the Catholic clergy to stop meddling in politics. In an interview with talk show host Boy Abunda, Marcos's wife reveals the former senator decided to run for the presidency while watching a Marvel movie.
6 months ago, he wasn't yet sure what to do. We had no party, And then one day we're watching Ant-Man in the room. And then he looked, because we love Marvel movies, and then he looked at me and he goes, okay, we're going to do this. He told me. I said, do what? Run for the presidency.
Ant-Man tells the story of a former convicted thief who turned into an Avenger with the ability to shrink to a tiny size. More stories ahead. It's a big night for BTS ARMYs. The first of 3 Permission to Dance on Stage Seoul concerts has kicked off. And another highly anticipated feature, the trailer for the new Star Wars spin-off show is out. Keep it here on CNN Philippines.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.